Security footage shows Dr. Amara Winston being physically escorted from her own office while her white colleagues stood watching, phones recording. The marble floors of Meridian Financial's executive suite echoed with the sound of designer heels being dragged. Two security guards flanked Dr. Amara Winston as her personal belongings scattered from a hastily packed cardboard box. Her Hermes briefcase hit the floor with a decisive thud. But here's what made every witness freeze. As those security cameras captured every humiliating second, as phones emerged from purses to record her downfall, Dr. Amara Winston looked directly into the nearest camera and spoke with unnerving calm. "You'll regret this decision within 72 hours. Her colleagues smirked. They whispered. Someone muttered, "Finally." What they didn't know was that they'd just declared war on someone who owned the very ground they stood on. Have you ever been so underestimated that people forgot to check who they were really dealing with? Welcome to Beat Stories, where justice speaks louder than revenge. We share tales of brilliant minds who faced discrimination and transformed entire systems through intelligence, not anger. Because the most powerful victory isn't destroying your enemies, it's ensuring they can never hurt anyone else again. 3 hours earlier, the mahogany conference table at Meridian Financial gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Dr. Amara Winston, 38, sat reviewing quarterly diversity reports. Her clinical psychology PhD and 5 years as employee relations director, having prepared her for difficult conversations. But not for this one. In exactly 47 minutes, this company's stock price would begin its steepest decline in corporate history. The players were already in position. CEO Marcus Rothwell tapped his Mont Blanc pen against legal documents marked workforce optimization. The euphemism fooled no one. This was about cutting costs by eliminating diversity programs and the people who championed them. "Amara," Marcus began, his voice carrying that particular corporate condescension reserved for inconvenient employees, "we need to discuss your department's performance metrics." The conference room's glass walls meant nothing was private. Every word, every gesture, every micro-expression was visible to the bustling office beyond. Phones would soon capture what came next. "Your diversity programs are bleeding us dry," Marcus continued, sliding a termination document across the polished surface. "We're hemorrhaging profits on initiatives that don't generate measurable returns." Board members nodded in synchronized agreement. Sarah Chen from HR avoided eye contact entirely. The choreography was obvious. This decision had been made weeks ago, in smaller rooms, without her voice. "Marcus, our employee satisfaction scores increased 23% this quarter," Amara replied, her voice steady despite the trap closing around her. "Retention rates are up 18%. The data clearly shows..." "The data shows we're spending $2.7 million annually on programs that appease a vocal minority," Marcus interrupted. "We need someone more culturally aligned with our fiscal priorities." The phrase hung in the air like poison gas. Culturally aligned. The dog whistle wasn't even subtle. "Pack your things. Security will escort you out. We're going in a different direction." Within seconds, the glass conference room became a fishbowl of judgment. Employees pressed against the windows, phones emerging from purses like weapons. The termination of the company's only black executive was about to become content. Marcus pressed his intercom. "Security to conference room A, employee termination protocol." 2 guards arrived within 90 seconds, their presence transforming a corporate decision into a public spectacle. As they flanked Amara, collecting her belongings with bureaucratic efficiency, the real damage began. "She always thought she was smarter than everyone else," whispered Janet from accounting, her voice carrying further than intended. Lottie said, The phones captured everything. The way Amara's shoulders remained straight despite the humiliation. How her personal photos tumbled into the cardboard box. The moment her company badge was ceremoniously cut in half. but they also captured something else, something that would matter later. As security prepared to escort her out, Amara reached for her briefcase. The subtle LW monogram caught the light. Discreet, expensive, meaningful to those who knew what to look for. "This conversation is being recorded," she said calmly, producing her phone. "I want that noted for the record." "Company policy prohibits recording in," Marcus began. "I'm no longer your employee," Amara interrupted. "And this is my personal device, on public property." She made a call. The conference room fell silent as her voice carried through the speakerphone. "Charlotte, it's Amara. We need to move up the timeline." A pause. Then, "Which timeline, Ms. Winston?" "The Meridian acquisition. I want those compliance files on my desk by morning." Marcus Rothwell's face drained of color. The board members exchanged glances. Charlotte's voice, crisp and professional, filled the room. "Should I activate the investigation protocols?" "Not yet," Amara replied, her eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "But prepare the documentation. All of it." The call ended. The room remained frozen in confused silence. Who was Charlotte? What timeline? What acquisition? As security escorted her toward the elevator, Amara's final words echoed through the conference room. 72 hours, Marcus. I suggest you use them wisely." The elevator doors closed on a room full of people who had just made the most expensive mistake of their careers. Outside Meridian Financial's glass towers, Amara Winston walked toward a waiting black sedan. The driver held the door open with practiced deference. As she settled into leather seats, her phone buzzed with notifications. Meridian's scandal was already trending, but social media outrage was just the beginning. The real storm was building in boardrooms 3,000 miles away, where her phone call had just triggered a chain reaction that would reshape corporate America. The 72-hour countdown had begun. Within 15 minutes, department heads received the memo. The corporate machinery moved with ruthless efficiency, each manager eager to distance themselves from the terminated diversity director. Sarah Chen's fingers flew across her keyboard, crafting an internal email that would later haunt her. Effective immediately, all diversity initiatives are suspended pending departmental review. Questions should be directed to legal. The IT department disabled Amara's access codes before she reached the parking garage. Her keycard beeped rejection at every door. The digital erasure of her corporate existence happened faster than her physical removal. "We should have done this months ago," Sarah muttered to Finance Director Tom Bradley, their conversation captured by the building's audio surveillance system. She always thought she was smarter than everyone else. But the managers didn't just stop at professional dismissal. They began constructing a narrative that would justify their complicity in what had just transpired. "Remember how she questioned the Williams account?" Tom replied, referencing a client meeting from 6 months earlier. "Always making everything about race." Their voices carried through the open office plan, reaching ears that were already recording, already documenting. The pile-on had begun, and it was being preserved in real time. The elevator descended past the 15th floor when Security Chief Robert Kane made his fatal error. He decided to exceed protocol. "Standard procedure requires a full bag search," Kane announced, his voice echoing in the enclosed space. "Need to check for company property." Amara's cardboard box was dumped onto the lobby's marble floor. Personal photos scattered. Her framed PhD diploma from Harvard cracked against the tiles. 30 employees watched from the mezzanine as her professional life was literally picked apart. "This is my personal briefcase," Amara said quietly as Kane reached for the Hermes bag. "Everything gets searched, company policy." But when Kane's fingers touched the leather handle, Amara's voice cut through the lobby like a blade. "That briefcase is worth more than your annual salary. Touch it again, and you'll be explaining yourself to lawyers who bill more per hour than you make per month." The lobby fell silent. Kane's hand froze mid-reach. Something in her tone, in the precision of her words, made everyone pause. The briefcase remained untouched. Hour by hour, the narrative shifted online. What began as outrage over workplace discrimination morphed into something darker, more personal, more vicious. Anonymous accounts flooded Meridian's social media with carefully crafted character assassination. Worked with her for 3 years. Always played the victim card. Difficult to work with. Made everything about her agenda. Finally, someone had the courage to do what needed doing. The comment sections became battlegrounds. Former colleagues hiding behind screen names shared twisted versions of workplace interactions. Every professional disagreement became evidence of her difficult personality. Every diversity initiative became proof of her reverse racism. But the digital mob had no idea they were building a legal case against themselves. Every anonymous post, every vindictive comment, every character assassination was being preserved by digital forensics experts who had been quietly monitoring the situation for weeks. The IP addresses traced back to Meridian employees. The timestamp metadata revealed coordination. The language analysis software identified patterns that would soon become evidence in federal court. By evening, the corporate assassination was complete. Local news stations picked up the story. Industry blogs published think pieces about diversity fatigue in corporate America. Professional networks buzzed with carefully worded support that actually reinforced the narrative of her termination. Amara Winston had been professionally executed in the court of public opinion. She stood in her Manhattan penthouse, city lights sprawling below, reading the coverage on her tablet. Each article, each comment, each social media post was being cataloged by teams of lawyers and investigators. Her phone rang. The caller ID showed Charlotte Lawson, legal. "The files are ready." Charlotte's voice was crisp, professional. "All compliance violations documented. The pattern is extensive." How extensive? 47 documented cases of discriminatory hiring practices. 12 instances of retaliation against diversity advocates. And Marcus Rothwell's personal communications. Charlotte paused. "Let's just say they're not going to age well in federal court." Amara walked to her floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the city where her career had just been publicly executed. But she wasn't looking at the streets below. She was looking at the Meridian Financial Building, its lights still blazing, as employees worked late, probably celebrating their victory. They had no idea what was coming. "Charlotte, I want you to prepare the full presentation. Board meeting tomorrow morning at Lawson Capital. Make sure everyone understands the stakes." All of them? Every single board member. Every department head. Every manager who participated in today's festivities. The penthouse fell silent except for the hum of the city below. In 12 hours, the hunters would become the hunted. The next morning's business news led with Meridian's stock price, up 3.2%, on news of organizational restructuring. Investors applauded the company's commitment to fiscal responsibility. Marcus Rothwell granted interviews, carefully explaining how difficult personnel decisions sometimes require courageous leadership. He positioned himself as the decisive CEO, who wouldn't bow to political correctness. But at 7:47 a.m., while Marcus was on CNBC explaining his personnel philosophy, every Meridian executive received an email that made their blood run cold. Board meeting, Lawson Capital, 447 Park Avenue, 9 o'clock IM sharp. Attendance mandatory. C. Lawson, Chair. The sender's signature line included a detail that none of them had bothered to research. Lawson Capital Management, $47 $200 million, 0 cents. Assets under management. Marcus's phone started ringing before he left the television studio. Board members, department heads, managers, all asking the same question. Who is C. Lawson? The answer would destroy everything they thought they knew about power, about control, and about the woman they had so casually discarded. By 8:30 a.m., black sedans were arriving at Meridian Financial, not to pick up executives for victory laps, but to transport them to a reckoning they never saw coming. The 72-hour countdown was about to reach zero. The Lawson Capital Conference Room occupied the entire 47th floor of 447 Park Avenue. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of Central Park, while the mahogany table could seat 30 executives comfortably. This morning, it hosted 12 very uncomfortable Meridian Financial board members. Marcus Rothwell entered last, his confident stride faltering as he noticed the armed security guards flanking the entrance. This wasn't a business meeting. This was something else entirely. Dr. Amara Winston sat at the head of the table, but she looked different. Gone was the corporate attire from yesterday's humiliation. Instead, she wore a tailored Armani suit that cost more than most people's cars. Her bearing transformed from employee to something far more dangerous. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice carrying new authority. "I believe we have some business to discuss." Marcus attempted to regain control. "Look, Amara, if this is about severance negotiations—" "Dr. Winston Lawson," she corrected quietly, "and this isn't about severance." The hyphenated name hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Winston Lawson. Several board members pulled out their phones, fingers frantically searching for information they should have discovered months ago. Amara reached for her phone and dialed a number on speaker. "Charlotte, are you ready with the presentation?" "Yes, Miss Winston Lawson. All documents are prepared for immediate execution." "Excellent. And the compliance investigation?" "Federal investigators have been briefed. They're standing by for your authorization." Marcus Rothwell's face went ashen. "Federal investigators." Charlotte Lawson's voice filled the room through crystal-clear speakers. "Should I explain the relationship for our guests, Amara?" "Please do." Dr. Amara Winston Lawson is the daughter of Senator Margaret Lawson and venture capitalist David Lawson. She sits on the board of Lawson Capital Management, which currently manages $47.2 billion in assets. She also chairs the Lawson Foundation's Corporate Accountability Initiative. The room's temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. "More relevantly," Charlotte continued, "Lawson Capital owns 34% of Meridian Financial through our subsidiary holdings. Dr. Winston Lawson has been conducting an undercover compliance investigation for the past 18 months. Sarah Chen's water glass slipped from nerveless fingers, shattering on the marble floor. "Undercover?" Marcus whispered. Amara opened her briefcase, the same Hermes bag that Security Chief Kane had attempted to search. She withdrew a folder marked Confidential Federal Complaints Investigation. Every conversation, every email, every discriminatory decision has been documented and preserved. The Employee Relations Director position was, let's call it an investigative assignment. She spread photographs across the table, screenshots of internal emails, audio transcripts of private conversations, video footage from conference rooms and hallways. Yesterday's termination was simply the final piece of evidence we needed to demonstrate a pattern of systematic discrimination. The board members stared at the evidence spread before them like a prosecutor's case file. Their own words, their own decisions, their own casual bigotry documented with forensic precision. Tom Bradley's voice cracked as he read his own email chain. She always makes everything about race. The timestamp showed it was sent while Amara was still being escorted from the building. "Oh my God," whispered Janet from accounting, recognizing her voice on an audio transcript. "We recorded ourselves." The phones that had captured Amara's humiliation had also captured their complicity. Every smirk, every whispered comment, every moment of unprofessional celebration was now evidence in a federal civil rights investigation. Security Chief Kane stood frozen in the corner. Understanding that his aggressive search protocol had been witnessed by security cameras that weren't controlled by Meridian Financial, but by Lawson Capital's building management. The beautiful irony, Amara said quietly, is that you documented your own crimes. Every social media post, every anonymous comment, every coordinated character assassination was preserved by our digital forensics team. She gestured to the windows overlooking the city. Those IP addresses you thought were anonymous? They traced back to Meridian's servers. The timing of your posts? They revealed coordination. The language patterns? They identified each individual contributor. But even as the room reeled from these revelations, Amara held back the most devastating information. The federal compliance investigation had uncovered something far worse than employment discrimination. Charlotte, please explain the additional findings to our guests. The investigation revealed systematic financial irregularities tied to diversity program funding. Grant money intended for minority business partnerships was repeatedly diverted to executive compensation packages. Marcus Rothwell's pen snapped in his grip. Specifically, $2.7 million in federal diversity grants were misappropriated over 3 years. This constitutes federal fraud under the Civil Rights Restoration Act of 1987. The room fell silent except for the sound of someone's labored breathing. But that's not the most interesting discovery, Charlotte continued. The investigation also revealed communication between Meridian executives and 3 other major financial firms, coordinating discriminatory hiring practices across the industry. Amara watched their faces process this information. Systematic fraud was a career-ending scandal. Coordinated discrimination across multiple corporations was a federal conspiracy that could result in prison sentences. This pattern suggests violations of the Sherman Antitrust Act, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and potentially RICO statutes if the coordination was extensive enough. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more authority than shouting. Gentlemen, ladies, you're not just facing termination. You're facing federal criminal charges. The evidence was overwhelming. The legal exposure was catastrophic. But Amara Winston Lawson wasn't finished. However, she said, closing the folder with decisive finality, I believe in redemption through accountability. Hope flickered in their eyes. You have 3 options. Option 1, immediate resignation, with full admission of wrongdoing and cooperation with federal investigators. Your pensions remain intact, your criminal exposure is minimized. She paused, letting them process the lifeline. Option 2, you implement comprehensive reforms under federal oversight. Every hiring decision, every promotion, every policy change gets reviewed by external auditors for the next 5 years. Marcus found his voice. And option 3? Mara's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Option 3. We proceed with full criminal prosecution. Lawson Capital divests our 34% stake, triggering an SEC investigation into market manipulation. Your stock price craters. Your personal assets get frozen during the federal investigation, and you spend the next decade explaining to prison cellmates how you thought it was acceptable to discriminate against a federal investigator. The room sat in stunned silence. The choice is yours, but I need your decision before market close on Friday. She gathered her documents and stood, her presence somehow filling the enormous conference room. Oh, and Marcus, that 72-hour deadline I mentioned? It wasn't a threat. It was a professional courtesy. The elevator doors closed behind her, leaving 12 of the most powerful people in American finance sitting in the wreckage of their assumptions about power, privilege, and the consequences of underestimating someone because of the color of their skin. Outside, the countdown had reached 0, but the real reckoning was just beginning. Friday morning arrived with the weight of an execution. The same Lawson Capitol conference room, the same panoramic views, but the atmosphere had transformed from revelation to judgment. This time, federal investigators occupied the corner seats, their presence lending gravity to every word. Marcus Rothwell entered flanked by 3 attorneys, their combined hourly rate exceeding most people's annual salaries. But money couldn't buy them out of this situation. Amara sat at the head of the table, a stack of legal documents arranged with surgical precision. Behind her, Charlotte Lawson operated a laptop connected to wall-mounted screens displaying real-time market data. Meridian Financial currently trades at $87 per share, Amara began without preamble. Our models project what happens under each scenario you're about to choose. The screens flickered to life, showing 3 distinct market projections. Scenario 1, full cooperation and immediate reform. Stock stabilizes around current levels. Minor institutional investor flight, but recoverable within 18 months. The first graph showed a gentle decline, followed by steady recovery. Scenario 2, partial compliance under federal oversight. Stock drops to $62 per share immediately, recovers to $75 within 2 years as reforms demonstrate measurable results. The second projection showed steeper initial losses but eventual stabilization. Scenario 3, you fight this investigation. The third graph was a cliff face dropping into an abyss. Charlotte Lawson's voice filled the room as she activated the presentation. Meridian Financial's market capitalization, $4.2 billion. Lawson Capital's stake, 34%. Valued at $1.4 billion. The numbers appeared on screen with devastating clarity. Our fund manages $47.2 billion in total assets. Meridian represents 3.1% of our holdings. We can absorb complete divestiture without material impact to our portfolio performance. Additional fees include 899, Medicare benefits, and diagnosis. Marcus's lead attorney, Jonathan Pierce, attempted intervention. Miss Lawson, surely we can reach an accommodation that doesn't require such dramatic measures. The accommodation was offered Wednesday, Amara replied. Your client chose public humiliation over private resolution. Charlotte continued the data presentation. Federal diversity grants misappropriated, $2.7 million over 36 months. This violates USC Title 42, Section 1981, carrying potential sentences of 10 years per count. The screen displayed legal statute references with highlighted penalty structures. Employment discrimination violations. 47 documented cases spanning 5 years. Each violation carries civil penalties of up to $300,000, plus punitive damages averaging $1.2 million per case in similar federal prosecutions. The resolution says, quote, hereby, our Office of The mathematical horror continued. Potential total exposure, $56.4 million in civil penalties alone, before punitive damages, before criminal fines, before legal costs. Amara stood and walked to the windows overlooking Central Park. Her voice remained conversational, but every word carried the weight of institutional power. Option 1. Marcus resigns immediately. Sarah Chen resigns immediately. Security Chief Kane is terminated for cause. You issue a public statement acknowledging systematic failures and commit to comprehensive reform. He turned back to face the room. Your golden parachutes remain intact. Marcus keeps his $42 million pension. Sarah retains her vested stock options. In exchange, you provide full cooperation with federal investigators and implement our recommended reforms within 30 days. The terms were better than they deserved, and everyone knew it. Option 2. You remain in position under federal oversight. Chief Diversity Officer reports directly to the CEO and the board, with quarterly audits by external firms. Hiring quotas. Minimum 40% diversity representation across all management levels within 18 months. Charlotte added supporting data. Historical analysis shows companies under federal diversity oversight experience average stock price increases of 12% within 3 years due to improved employee retention and expanded market access. Executive compensation gets tied to diversity metrics. Meet the targets, earn your bonuses. Miss them, forfeit 20% of base salary to a diversity fund administered by the Lawson Foundation. Marcus finally spoke. And if we choose option 2, you keep your jobs. You salvage your reputations. You transform Meridian into an industry leader for corporate accountability. I believe she left, but Amara wasn't finished explaining their choices. Option 3, you fight this investigation. The room's temperature seemed to drop as she outlined the nuclear scenario. Lawson Capital divests our entire 34% stake Monday morning at market open. $1.4 billion flooding the market simultaneously crashes your stock price by an estimated 63% within the first trading hour. Charlotte's laptop displayed market modeling that looked like a heart attack in graph form. CCE investigation triggers automatically when institutional investors dump holdings exceeding 30%. They'll examine every transaction, every executive decision, every board vote for the past 5 years. The federal investigators in the corner took notes as she continued. Your personal assets get frozen pending criminal investigation. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, real estate holdings. Everything becomes evidence in a federal case. She walked slowly around the table, her voice never rising above conversational level. Marcus, your Hamptons estate gets seized. Sarah, your children's college funds become inaccessible. Tom, that yacht you bought last year gets impounded. Each personal detail hit like a physical blow. They had been thoroughly investigated. But the personal destruction is nothing compared to the professional consequences. Charlotte brought up a new screen. Industry blacklisting analysis, based on similar federal prosecutions. Average time to reemployment, never. Convicted executives in financial services face permanent industry exclusion under Section 19 of the Securities Exchange Act. You won't just lose these jobs, you'll lose the ability to work in finance anywhere in the United States. The wall clock read 2:47 p.m. The stock market closed at 4:00 p.m. Eastern. 113 minutes, Amara said quietly. That's how long you have to decide. Marcus consulted frantically with his attorneys. Whispered conversations filled the room as board members calculated their exposure, their options, their remaining leverage. But they had no leverage. The evidence was overwhelming. The legal exposure was catastrophic. The financial consequences were unavoidable. At 3:15 p.m., Marcus Rothwell looked up from his legal huddle with the expression of a man who had just realized he was drowning. Option 1, he said quietly. We choose option 1. Sarah Chen nodded her agreement, tears streaming down her face. The other board members followed suit, their resignations delivered in voices barely above whispers. Excellent choice, Amara said, producing pre-prepared documents. These are your resignation letters, effective immediately. Public statements acknowledging systematic failures and committing to comprehensive reform. Full cooperation agreements with federal investigators. The documents were signed in silence, each signature representing the end of a career built on the assumption that discrimination carried no consequences. But even as they signed away their positions, their reputations, their futures, Amara had one final revelation. Oh, and gentlemen, ladies? The investigation doesn't end with Meridian. The room froze. The evidence revealed coordination with 3 other major financial firms. Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and J.P. Morgan Chase are receiving similar visits from federal investigators next week. The scope of the conspiracy became clear. This wasn't just about one company's discrimination. This was about systematic exclusion across the entire financial industry. You see, when you coordinate discriminatory hiring practices across multiple firms, you don't just violate civil rights law, you violate antitrust law. And antitrust violations carry criminal sentences up to 20 years. The signed documents were collected with ceremonial efficiency. Careers that had taken decades to build were dismantled in an afternoon. As security escorted the former executives from the building, Amara remained at the conference table, city lights beginning to twinkle below. The reckoning was complete, but the real work was just beginning. The dominoes fell with corporate precision. Marcus Rothwell's resignation hit the newswires at 4:23 p.m., 17 minutes after market close. His carefully crafted statement read like a confession. I accept full responsibility for systematic failures in leadership and corporate culture at Meridian Financial. By Monday morning, his corner office was being cleared by security. The mahogany desk where he'd signed termination papers was hauled away by movers who whispered about federal evidence preservation protocols. Sarah Chen lasted until Tuesday. Her resignation email, sent at 3:47 a.m., contained phrases her lawyers had crafted to minimize criminal exposure. I deeply regret my role in perpetuating workplace environments that failed to reflect our stated values. The public apology she recorded would play on every business news channel for weeks. Tears streaming, voice cracking, reading from a script that acknowledged systematic bias in hiring, promotion, and retention decisions. Security Chief Robert Kane was terminated Wednesday for gross violation of company protocols. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who had humiliated Dr. Winston was fired for the same behavior that had exposed the entire conspiracy. 3 board members resigned by Friday. The rest agreed to comprehensive diversity training and external oversight of all personnel decisions. But the individual fallout was just the beginning. The Meridian Equity Protocol was implemented within 30 days, transforming every aspect of corporate operations. The document, written by federal compliance experts and civil rights attorneys, read like a roadmap for corporate accountability. Effective immediately, all hiring decisions require diverse interview panels, announced interim CEO Patricia Williams, the first Black woman to lead a major Wall Street firm. No management position can be filled without at least 3 qualified minority candidates in the final pool. The Chief Diversity Officer position was elevated to C-suite level, reporting directly to the CEO and the board. Dr. Marcus Johnson, recruited from Harvard Business School, commanded a salary exceeding most vice presidents. This isn't about quotas, Dr. Johnson explained to skeptical managers during mandatory training sessions. This is about dismantling systems that have systematically excluded qualified candidates based on irrelevant characteristics. Compensation structures were revolutionized. Executive bonuses now tied directly to diversity metrics. Meet representation targets. Earn full compensation. Miss them? Forfeit 20% to a fund supporting minority business development. The changes weren't cosmetic. They were structural, measurable, and legally enforceable. The Equity Watch application launched 6 weeks after the scandal broke. Developed by a Black-owned tech firm from Atlanta, the platform allowed anonymous reporting of biased incidents, with military-grade encryption protecting whistleblowers. Every report triggered automatic investigation protocols. Department heads received real-time bias alerts. HR personnel faced mandatory response timelines. Acknowledge within 4 hours, investigate within 48, resolve within 2 weeks. The system creates accountability through transparency, explained Chief Technology Officer Keisha Rodriguez, hired from Google to oversee the digital transformation. Bias thrives in darkness. We're turning on the lights. External oversight came from the Lawson Foundation's Corporate Accountability Initiative. Quarterly audits examined hiring data, promotion patterns, compensation structures, and employee satisfaction metrics. The results were published publicly, creating market pressure for continuous improvement. Wall Street analysts began incorporating diversity metrics into their investment recommendations. Companies with strong inclusion records outperformed those without by an average of 15% over the following year. The transformation of Meridian Financial became a Harvard Business School case study, not because of the dramatic confrontation, but because of the systematic approach to institutional change. Dr. Winston Lawson could have pursued pure destruction, Professor Elena Martinez explained to her graduate students. Instead, she chose strategic reform that created lasting value. The financial results supported this approach. Meridian's stock price, after initial volatility, climbed 23% over 18 months. Employee retention improved by 31%. Customer satisfaction scores reached all-time highs as diverse teams better served diverse markets. Revenge would have been satisfying for a day, Amara reflected during a keynote address at the National Association of Black MBAs. Reform creates value for generations. The intellectual victory resonated beyond corporate boardrooms. Law schools analyzed the case as a masterclass in strategic litigation. Business schools studied the systematic approach to organizational change. Civil rights organizations adopted similar undercover investigation techniques. Within 6 months, 12 major financial firms had voluntarily implemented similar protocols. The threat of Lawson Capital investigations prompted preemptive reforms across Wall Street. Goldman Sachs announced a billion-dollar commitment to minority business development. J.P. Morgan Chase elevated their chief diversity officer to the executive committee. Morgan Stanley published detailed demographic data for the first time in company history. The Meridian model became the industry standard, reported the Wall Street Journal in a year-end analysis. Not because firms embraced social justice, but because they feared federal prosecution. The congressional hearing that followed drew testimony from executives across the financial sector. Senator Elizabeth Warren's questioning was surgical. How many other Dr. Winston Lawsons are working undercover in your firms right now? The answer, as federal investigations revealed, was more than anyone expected. The Corporate Accountability and Financial Services Act passed the Senate with bipartisan support 18 months later. The legislation mandated diversity reporting, established federal oversight mechanisms, and created whistleblower protection specifically for discrimination investigators. Dr. Winston Lawson's courage created a roadmap for systemic change, Senator Warren stated during the bill signing ceremony. But more importantly, it demonstrated that accountability is achievable when victims possess both evidence and leverage. The law carried Amara's fingerprints throughout its provisions. Real-time reporting requirements, federal oversight protocols, criminal penalties for systematic discrimination. Everything Meridian had implemented voluntarily became mandatory across the industry. Corporate America had been permanently transformed not through protests or litigation, but through strategic investigation and systematic reform. The woman they had tried to erase had rewritten the rules of American business. 2 years after the security footage showed Dr. Amara Winston being dragged from her office, she stood before the United Nations General Assembly addressing global corporate accountability standards. The transformation was complete. From terminated employee to international advocate for systemic change. Discrimination revealed something I never knew about myself, she told the Assembly of World Leaders. It showed me that my true power wasn't in any corporate title, but in my ability to expose and reform institutional injustice. Her consulting firm, Winston Lawson Strategic Accountability, had conducted undercover investigations at 47 major corporations across 12 industries. Each investigation followed the Meridian model. systematic evidence gathering, strategic revelation, comprehensive reform. The personal growth extended beyond professional success. Relationships deepened with authentic allies who had supported her during the crisis. Professional networks expanded to include civil rights leaders, federal investigators, and reform-minded executives who understood that accountability created value. I learned that being underestimated is actually a superpower, she reflected during a Harvard Business Review interview. People reveal their true character when they think you can't hold them accountable. The ripple effects continued, expanding across American corporate culture. The Meridian model had been implemented at over 300 companies, creating a new standard for workplace accountability. Harvard Business School published a 5-year study showing that firms implementing comprehensive diversity protocols experienced average stock price increases of 18%, employee retention improvements of 27%, and customer satisfaction gains of 22%. The business case for inclusion isn't just morally correct, the study concluded. It's financially superior to discrimination in every measurable metric. Congressional oversight expanded beyond financial services. Technology companies, healthcare systems, manufacturing firms, and retail chains all faced mandatory diversity reporting under federal law. The cultural shift reached beyond corporate boardrooms. Business schools redesigned curricula to include bias recognition training. Law schools created specialized civil rights investigation programs. MBA programs required courses on inclusive leadership. And technology, including GPS. And Dr. Winston Lawson didn't just change one company, Professor Elena Martinez observed. She changed how America thinks about corporate accountability. The Meridian transformation demonstrated principles that extended far beyond any single workplace crisis. Strategic thinking had triumphed over emotional reaction. Long-term institutional change had proven more valuable than short-term personal revenge. Systematic evidence gathering created unassailable legal positions. Patient investigation revealed patterns that snapshot judgments would have missed. Comprehensive reform generated lasting value that pure destruction could never achieve. Justice isn't about punishment, Amara explained during her TED Talk, which garnered 12 million views. Justice is about creating systems that prevent future victims from experiencing what you experienced. The intellectual approach had dismantled institutional bias through documentation, revelation, and strategic reform. Knowledge and preparation had proven more powerful than anger or litigation alone. Most importantly, the case demonstrated that individual courage, combined with institutional leverage, could reshape entire industries. One person's refusal to accept discrimination had created accountability mechanisms protecting millions of future employees. The story of Dr. Amara Winston Lawson proves that underestimation can become transformation, that humiliation can become empowerment, and that strategic patience can create systemic change. But this story isn't finished. It continues every time someone refuses to accept workplace discrimination. Every time bias gets documented instead of tolerated. Every time strategic thinking replaces emotional reaction. Have you witnessed workplace discrimination that needs addressing? Have you seen bias disguised as cultural fit or performance issues? Have you watched qualified people get systematically excluded from opportunities they deserved? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might be the evidence someone else needs to create change. Your courage might inspire the next strategic investigation that transforms another industry. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear that their voice matters, that their experiences are valid, and that systematic change is possible. Here at Beat Stories, we believe every act of injustice contains the seeds of its own destruction. You just need to know how to find them and use them strategically. Subscribe to Beat Stories for more incredible accounts of justice, transformation, and the power of strategic accountability. Because in a world where discrimination still exists, we need more Dr. Amara Winston Lawsons. And the next one might be you. Beat Stories doesn't just tell you what happened. We show you how ordinary people beat impossible odds through intelligence, preparation, and perfect timing. Hit that subscribe button to join a community that celebrates strategic victories over systemic injustice. The security footage that showed her being dragged away became the opening scene of a documentary about corporate accountability. But the real ending isn't on any screen. It's being written by every person who refuses to accept that this is just how things are, and decides to become the change they want to see. And that's exactly the kind of story we live to tell here at Beat Stories.
Every time someone stands up, speaks out, or refuses to be erased, a new story is born. At Beat Stories, we archive that courage. Subscribe now and help us keep these moments alive, because the more we share them, the harder they are to ignore.